Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos and welcome to a video. We have some patch notes, some hot fixes, some trinket changes, some class balance changes, some dungeon changes, and some raid changes in this video from the Echo Race to World First venue here. So again, videos are maybe going to be a little bit slower over the next few weeks, but I'm going to do what I can. It is 5:30 a.m. local time and we're ready to talk about some World of Warcraft. So what is happening? First of all, in the hotfixes that were posted earlier, there were two typos made that are being not going to be applied, which is basically the damage component of the buff to Resto Druid, the 2% buff, and the nerf to Holy Paladin, the 3% nerf, are not going to be applied. Obviously, this is good news for Holy Paladins, bad news for Resto Druids. Holy Paladin already was looking quite strong in Raid, even without this change, or this, I guess, lack of change coming. So even stronger for them, IMO. Resto Druid, I'm also not sure that this was necessary here. So, but either way, I mean, again, I think a lot of people are going to look at this and be like, oh, Resto Druid didn't need that. But on the other hand, it's not like this is Blizzard being like, oh, we've changed our mind about this change. It's like, oh, oops, that was a typo, right? We weren't intending to do that. We were just trying to change the healing of some healers because we were looking at some healing numbers, and somebody accidentally wrote "and damage" into the patch notes. Also, we have a change to the Algathar puzzle box. Algathar puzzle box's shared cooldown is increased to 30 seconds, and the effect is decreased by 30% for Unholy spec. So, lots to unpack here, especially if you haven't been following along what's been happening with the puzzle box. During the PTR cycle, they were like, you know what? Algathar puzzle box is too powerful. A lot of specs are going to use this. So what we're going to do is we're going to nerf the amount of mastery that it gives you, but we'll make it last for 30 seconds instead of 20 seconds to make it to make the hit a little bit less bad. We'll try and make it a little bit less good for people's cooldowns, but not that much worse if they're currently wearing it for the start of the new raid, right? The problem was that by making its duration 30 seconds, but it only put your other trinkets on a 20-second cooldown, that opens up a beautiful window we like to call the double on use window. That Font of Power, Ajar's Font of Power, was the most famous of this double on use power, but there have been other effects like it in the past. But yes, the Algathar puzzle box was moved to being possible to use as a double on use trinket. So you would press your Algathar puzzle box, and then it would give you this buff, and then 20 seconds later, you'd still have 10 seconds of the buff, and then you could press another trinket and get 10 seconds of double trinket value. Now, even though the puzzle box mastery was nerfed, it's still quite a lot of mastery, and if you were a heavily cooldown damage-based spec, especially one that scaled hard off of mastery, especially one that had another good on-use trinket that was available, then you could get a lot of value out of Puzzle Box. Turns out Unholy fit the bill for this really well, and Unholy, especially with Power Infusion, in all their cooldowns, was going to be doing immense damage because of this double on use 10 seconds where they were just going to be blasting unbelievable amounts of damage. So this nerf is a double nerf to that. The 30-second shared cooldown increase is enough to already kill the double on use potential here. Now you're not going to be able to use a second trinket while you still have any puzzle box left. And they've also separately nerfed the size of the effect for Unholy, which I believe is insult to injury here. I think this is not necessary if you're doing this shared cooldown change, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not an Unholy scientist. But either way, this is actually quite a big nerf to Unholy, especially early in the tier. One of the strengths of this was that this is an item from last tier, so you didn't need to farm it. And so Unholy would be online with one less item that they needed to go grab. But now that is less true, so Unholy will suffer as a result of this. That being said, I do think it is good that old trinkets from old content, especially in this current world of like, if you want a 415 Algathar puzzle box and you didn't play in season 1, I think you're just out of luck. I don't know what the highest you can get from like a season 1 M plus M0 is going to be, right? Like going and doing Algathar M0, I don't know what you can even get an upgrade to this season. Maybe you can go higher than 415. I'm not sure. I actually don't know what the answer is to that. But either way, it would have been cringe. So I think this is a good change. I am suspicious of it coming this late in the cycle because this was a big part of the planning that a lot of people have been doing. A lot of people have been playing Unholy. And again, this is actually quite a large nerf to Unholy is the thing. So I'm suspicious a little bit of that. Obviously, it's better to do it now than, in 3 days. But I think it would have been much better to do this a week ago than now. And like 3 weeks ago than now would have been even bester, because that would have meant then that there would have been time to look at Unholy's damage profile without Puzzle Box and be like, okay, are we happy with this? Because my suspicion is this is pretty bad news for the spec, but we will see. We also have some tuning changes coming to Neltharion's class trinkets. So there are 3 class trinkets from Neltharion that they're called class trinkets. They're actually, each of them apply to a certain set of classes, either 4 or 5. The 5 class one is the Call to Chaos, which applies to Warrior, Paladin, Mage, Demon Hunter, and Evoker. It's a crit-based trinket, and it has had its primary stat here buffed by 10%, which is a lot. That's a large amount of this trinket. The power of this, some of it's coming from the crit that it just always gives you, but the size of the proc getting bigger is certainly tremendous. Like, this is a big buff to this effect, and I think may well move it from not good to good for some of these specs, and from good to great or even bis for others of them, which, this trinket, thing you've got to consider as well, that it's giving you 5% increased damage taken. So it's also very rare. So for it to be worth, especially farming, but even equipping, it needs to be better by quite a bit than the next best trinket, right? Because, taking 5% increased damage on the nastiest content you can be doing is often a really bad thing. The Call to Suffering, which is the Rogue Priest DK Druid one that triggers off of periodic effects. It's a verse-based trinket, and it has had its primary stat buffed by 5%. This one was already a bigger proc, shorter time though, of the proc, but again, making this much more, this is only a 5% buff, not a 10% buff, but still making it more appealing. And then finally, the Call to Dominance, which is famously the Warlock one, but is also on Shaman, Monk, and Hunter. That one is not getting a buff. Still turbo bis hyper, probably still the most important one to put on your Demonology Warlocks. Again, if you haven't been following the previous videos, these trinkets all got effectively a nerf from their PTR versions earlier this week because they were taken from hasted RPPM to just RPPM, which means they're not going to do extra procs based on your haste. It's good and normal for stat trinkets to not be hasted RPPM, but that was not the version we'd been playing with on PTR or theory crafting around, so it lowered their value for a lot of specs relative to other trinkets, and of course, again, disrupted plans, and this may again disrupt plans again. Still a good thing to do for Blizzard. They should be disrupting plans if they think it's going to make the raid better, and especially with stuff like itemization. I think these sorts of like existing items, spec balance, those sorts of things, it's really good to do those earlier rather than later. Changes like this are pretty unlikely to mean that like people's decisions about what to main are going to be hugely impacted. Of course, it has the potential to, in theory, impact it, but I think these sorts of changes are much more okay to do night before the raid comes out. We have some Mythic Plus changes as well. I've closed all the togglers here, but if you want to go through and read them all yourself, there are togglers available that you can go through in this link, which will be in the description below, and you can see what is happening to all the different dungeons. But we have some difficulty tuning to Pinnacle, Nelthslayer, Halls of Infusion, Old Demand, Neltharis, Freehold, and General, which looks like it is also Vortex Pinnacle, although I'm not 100% sure. And then we also have, Brackenhide, Halls of Infusion, and Neltharis changes also coming in, although the Neltharis... Actually, there were more Neltharis changes, further down here, right? Yeah, there are. So a lot of dungeons getting a lot of different changes. Some of these are buffs, some of these are nerfs. I'm not going to go into them in specific detail. I'm sure there's actually... I haven't looked all the way through here to see if there are really big ones. Probably something that would have been good to do, but I just wanted to get this video out. But definitely go take a look through that yourself as well if you're interested. Notably as well, we have count changes. Vortex Pinnacle, Halls of Infusion, and Brackenhide Hollow are all having their count changed. So first of all, the total count requirement has been changed as well. A lot of people think about dungeons in terms of percent, but the way that it works behind the scenes is that every dungeon has a flat count number that it needs. And then you have mobs within the dungeon giving certain amounts of that that are then converted usually to percent by the game for you. And so here we are seeing the count increased, and then we are seeing a lot of mobs having their count given increased as well, although notably Turbulent Squalls, Servant of Assad, and Executor of the Caliph have all had their count decreased. So this may affect the pulls, the routing in this dungeon, right? This might mean that some routes are now undercount, some routes are now overcount, and some pulls have gotten relatively more or less efficient. And I don't have the specifics on that in front of me here. Halls of Infusion is having a similar change happening where the total count required is increasing. Containment Apparatus is going to start giving count. And then Geomancers, Ravagers, Zealots, Dragonflies, and Earthshakers have all had their count decreased by a little bit as well. Brackenhide Hollow has had its count required decreased and has had the count of Bears, sentries increased, and the skulking gut stabbers, which I believe are the stealthing fellers, are going to have their count decreased as well by a little bit. So Brackenhide, it's hard to imagine this making any routes not have enough count. I think this is just going to mean that you can probably cut a pull from some routes. These other ones, I'm a little bit less confident in whether they're meaning you're generally going to cut a pull, add a pull, or keep your pulls about the same. My guess is that it generally will probably equal out to most routes will probably still work as is, but not 100% sure there. If you are a route pre-downloader, if you've pre-downloaded anybody's routes for these dungeons, do make sure that they are still, be aware, I guess, that they may not work because of these changes in these 3 dungeons: Vortex Pinnacle, Halls of Infusion, and Brackenhide. Although you should always be wary at the start of a new patch anyways, because sometimes MDT or Keystone Guru or whatever have wrong count as well for the first few weeks. So that word of warning aside, we also have a final piece of news here about cosmetics. We have a Kazara the Hellforged themed Highland Drake customization. Really, really sick looking. I think as soon as we saw Kazara the Hellforged, the model, everybody was hoping it was going to be a mount, and turns out it is going to be a mount, which is super sweet. It is a dragon riding customization for the Highland Drake, and it is only in the Dungeon Journal on Mythic difficulty as well, which would be a change from the Razageth one, which was a random drop from any difficulty. A lot of different people have different takes on this one. I personally thought it was fine and cool to have one that was a random drop on any difficulty. I also think it's fine and cool to have ones that are specific drops on specific difficulties. It's unclear if this is going to be an RNG drop or a guaranteed drop. I think Mythic difficulty drops in particular do best when they are guaranteed drops, because so few Mythic kills happen that if it's also a small % chance on Mythic, I think that ends up being really really harsh. But having one or more drop guaranteed per Mythic kill will be cool. It does, one downside of it is that it does kind of facilitate sales being more of a thing, which obviously is good for my gold coffers, but it is bad for, I don't know, sales. Sales are kind of icky, right? Nobody is super happy with them in their current state. Guild's got to do them so we can buy our consumables, right? And people want to buy them, and I think buying them for a cool mount transmog is reasonable. Just the fact that it's WoW token existing and stuff does make it feel kind of bad. My personal favorite solution for this is whenever they can do what they did on Gul'dan, where there was a green Infernal that could just drop on any difficulty randomly, and there was a red Infernal that dropped on Mythic guaranteed. I think something like that is a great way to make sure that there's something for everybody here. But alternating one tier having an everybody drop, one tier having a Mythic drop also seems fine to me, especially, because obviously the solution of just give more stuff so that everybody can get something. Well, there's limited, I guess, dev time and resources and stuff. And, the Gul'dan having 2 different colors works, but having a recolor of something like this probably would not be super cool. I don't know. It's like the coolness of this thing is the colors, I think. So anyways, that's just my take on it. Curious to know what your take is, though, of course, and your thoughts on all of these changes, all of the topics in this video. Let me know what you think down in the description or down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.